All right, we're back out in the shop today. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Ferrari Motorsports. So you want to be a race car driver. If you like the content so far, please consider subscribing to the channel, dropping a like on the video, hitting the notifications, and leaving a comment below. Now, today's topic is going to be, it's somewhat of a controversy, and it's not just in the racer world, it's in the car guy world as well. Built versus bought. Now, what is built versus bought? I'm sure some of you have probably seen the stickers. It says this ride or this truck or whatever was built, not bought. And what that simply means is that the person who has that sticker believes that they're superior to somebody that may have largely paid for the labor on their vehicle out of pocket rather than turning wrenches themselves. And I find this to be a little disingenuous, considering that most of the guys that built not bought didn't build much of anything. They bought a kit, they bought a bunch of parts, and they assembled it together. They still spend money, they just might not have spent on the labor and had somebody else assemble it for them. And in reality, everybody's buying something, whether they're buying the bar stock and bending it themselves or they're buying a completed race car. Unless you own the mines and are smelting everything yourself, you're buying just the same as everybody else is. You might just be doing it at a little bit cheaper of a way that's more time intensive. And that's another thing, is time. You're spending time. Whether you're assembling it yourself or you're paying for somebody else to do it, it's that trade-off, dollars versus minutes. You know, if you want to build everything yourself, and maybe it's a little cheaper for you, maybe you have the skills, it's going to be, you know, you're going to be spending more time that you might otherwise have been able to spend in another fashion, but you're choosing to spend that time. So built not bought's kind of BS in my opinion. It doesn't matter whether you're spending dollars or spending time, you're spending something. You're buying that finished product either through your labor, your time, or through your dollars. There are pros and cons to each approach, and we're going to cover some of them today. And these are things, you know, you're saying to yourself, wait, how does this pertain to me being a race car driver? Well, these are things you have to consider when you're putting your program together. How much of the actual labor do you want to do yourself? How much of it can you do yourself? Are you under time constraints that force you to subcontract some of the work out? Or are you just kind of on a schedule your own where you'll be done when you're done? This is all stuff you have to consider. Alright, so we're going to start with pros and cons of buying. Some of the pros are you're more likely to have professional quality work. You're more likely to get it in a time frame because you are paying somebody to do this. More than likely, that is their job, and they're going to have more time and more skills and equipment to be able to process your request faster. Now, some of the cons, especially if you're buying a used car from somebody else or taking on somebody else's project to finish, you might have to change some stuff up that you wouldn't otherwise have had to. Maybe some of the construction's out of date. Maybe some of the gear's out of date. Maybe the suspension setup isn't what you would have started with. So now you have this car, okay, great, but you're still spending a bunch and money and time to change things around the way you want them. So now that con that I just spoke about buying can also be a pro depending on how much research you do and what comes with the car that you bought. Especially if you're buying used, maybe you can sell off some of the parts that you don't want and recoup some of your costs that way. Now, some quick pros and cons about building the car yourself. The first one, a lot of people get a sense of pride and accomplishment. They say, yeah, I built that, I did that, you know, I bent the tubes, I made the welds, I assembled everything. All right, cool, great. But a lot of times people that do this don't have the money to go out and pay somebody to build these projects. And they're forced to take on a lot of this work on their own. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That just means that it's going to take more time, and there might be some screw-ups or redos that you have to make in order to accomplish your goals. You're going to be building a skill set, and it might take you a few tries to get it right. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with learning. So a pro of buying that can be a con of building, especially if you're trying to get into a sanctioned event like a race. If you build it, you might not, even if you're following the rule book, you might not get it quite right. And it can be a little more difficult to get a home-built car past tech versus something you have professionally done. That's not to say that you shouldn't try on your own if you're really that determined, like we are, to build our own car. That's just saying that you have to be more careful for the simple fact that, this isn't you going out and paying, big hotshot professional race car builder to do this work for you. This is your work. This is your craftsmanship. And this is now maybe tech saying, hey, this isn't up to snuff. So now you just lost out on your weekend. Or they give you a fix by next event if it's not serious enough. So a pro of building that can be a con with buying a car, especially if you decide you're going to buy somebody else's race car to get on track a little quicker, you might not necessarily be able to drive what you want. Say you're a big BMW fan. Say you're a Nissan fan. Say you're a fan of something a little more obscure like Fiats. BMWs and Nissans are going to be a little easier to find than Fiats, especially older Fiats. Just for the simple fact that a Fiat's a more niche car. And this is just an example. There's plenty out there. Whereas if you build it, you can take your time, find the right car. If you're not starting with what you have, which is kind of what we did. But you can go out and you can find the right car. You can build what you want. You can race what you want. And just a big pro that people see with building over buying is that it's more theirs. They put more blood, sweat, and tears into it. All right, so we're going to wrap up build versus bought. I mean, we can ramble on about this all day. I believe we've rambled enough. All it really is are you willing to spend the time and develop the skill set to build the car? Or are you going to spend all your money and give it to somebody else who has the time and the skill set, and it's probably their day job to build these race cars and work on cars like this? I'll tell you a quick story about a friend of mine who the bought crowd would absolutely despise for no real reason. I mean, the guy is really good at what he does in his day job. And because he's really good at what he does, he gets compensated pretty well for what he does. I won't mention details. He kind of needs to remain anonymous to do his job correctly. And we have another friend who the first friend is paying a lot of money to build his car for him. And it's not because the guy has no desire to not build a car. It's because he has no desire and acknowledges that he has no desire to develop the skill set necessary to build the car. But this other friend of ours is pretty much a genius when it comes to building cars or figuring out how to make stuff work together that you might not think at first glance could work together. So friend A is paying friend B. Friend A has the money, friend B has the skill set. So that friend B can build the car for friend A. Now, I just illustrate this, and this is a friend situation. This isn't a business situation. Well, it is a business because money is changing hands. But, I just use this example to kind of illustrate the wider world where not everybody can assemble a car. Not everybody can weld. Not everybody knows how or has the mental capacity to kind of see in 3 dimensions what is going to come together. If we were all like that, we wouldn't have bankers and businessmen. We wouldn't probably have pilots. We wouldn't have accountants. We would all just be a society of mechanics, and then probably wouldn't have a society at all because everybody would have the same skill set. And that's really what it comes down to, is some people don't have the skills or have no desire to get their hands dirty to learn the skills. Some people are more analytic, they're more business oriented, they're more plant manager, maybe CPA types. And other people, they want to get their hands dirty, they like working with their hands. That's all it really comes down to. So now that we've kind of rambled our way through built versus bought, we're going to get on a second subject. It's kind of related. That is arrive and drive seat rental versus owning the car and owning the team. Pros and cons to each. We're going to start with arrive and drive. So arrive and drive. Biggest pro, you don't have to pay to maintain the car. Yes, you're paying to rent the seat, but you don't have to maintain the car. You don't have to transport it. All you have to do is get yourself to the track with your gear ready to race. Now, some cons, especially if this is your first time renting from somebody. Everything might sound great over the phone, but once you get there, you find out it's a total, snafu, a foobar situation. The car might not be what they promised. The atmosphere might not be what they promised. You might have a team full of idiots, for an internet-friendly term. And you might not have a good experience. Now, if you've rented from the team before and they're good guys and they're run professionally, or at least in such a manner that suits your style, then good to go, no problems. But if you've never rented from them before, you might have issues, you never know. Now, big pro is it is the fastest way to get on track, because you don't have to build a car. You're not buying a car from somebody. You're literally saying, hey, I want to go racing, and somebody says, hey, I have a seat. This is how much it costs to rent the seat. This is what you have to do to be licensed for the series. And that's pretty much it. You put your money in the team owner's hand, and you go out for a weekend of racing. Now, another con is you might not necessarily get to drive what you want, depending on the series you're in and how much you're willing to pay. Which goes back to built versus bought. You're buying the seat, you don't own the car. So you might have to put up with that. You might not fit in the car very well. If you're a tall guy and the car was built for short people, you might have some issues. A lot of those cars tend to have adjustable seats, so it's not so bad, but you still might not fit in the car very well. Now on to team ownership, car ownership. Big pros for that is you can race what you want. You want to race a BMW? All right, cool. Go out and buy or build a BMW. You want to race something more obscure? Cool. Go and do that. You can build the car to fit you. Some of your renters might have problems, but you won't. And in general, you'll know the maintenance history of the car because you're going to be the one maintaining it. You're going to be the one taking care of it. Now, on the flip side, because you are maintaining and caring for the car, now you have those expenses. Now you have your transporter expenses, your transportation expenses, to and from getting your car and equipment to and from the track. And especially if you're renting seats, now you have those expectations that you have to fulfill. You have somebody coming in to drive your car, and you promise them a turnkey, ready to go experience. Now you have to deliver on that. So, yeah, you have more control, but it's more expensive. A lot of people like having that control because now they know that they have a good, solid car ready to go whenever they want. They don't have to try to find a seat, which is another con of arrive and drive, is you have to hope that you have a seat open for whatever race you want to attend. Say you want to go to Indianapolis. Say you want to go to VIR, Daytona, wherever. You have to hope that those seats aren't sold out. Whereas being a team owner, your biggest concern is filling the seats, which arguably is a little easier. You've already got the car, you've already got the entry spot in the race. Now you just have to find people to drive the car. Depending on the race, you're going to find some people that are pretty desperate to fill those seats and get into that race. They might not necessarily be happy with what they're driving, but they'll be happy that they're there. All right, now to sum up the video, we're going to go back to built versus bought, which is kind of a BS argument for anybody, especially on the built side. All right, you assembled it, but you still paid for it. You paid for the parts to assemble out of pocket, and you paid your time to assemble them versus the guy that bought, whereas he just traded his time for the money to pay the guy that built it. So that whole argument, in my opinion, needs to go away because it kind of splits the community a little bit. It might be in good fun, but some people take things way too serious and don't have the right perspective on it, at least in my opinion. The other thing that we touched on in this video was arrive and drive versus team ownership. We'll be going more in depth in the team ownership side for simple, obvious reason that we are building a car. But arrive and drive, fastest way to go racing, because you don't have to build the car. You don't have to try to get everything together on time. You just rent the seat, show up, and drive. However, team ownership, you have more control over things. You know the car's history. You know the maintenance on it because you're doing the maintenance. And it's depending on the kind of person you are, whether you want that headache or not, it can be an overall better experience because you know what that car is going to do and you know how it's going to act. As always, we here at Ferrari Motorsports appreciate the support that we get from our viewers and our community. And in general, you guys are just awesome. And it's going to be a lot of fun to get out there and take our mission with us to the track. Ferrari Motorsports, turning miles into smiles.